So if we judge the performance of this GNU, Pete, what are we supposed to be looking at? What are we comparing here?
I think that there's one aspect of the government of national unity that they talked about initially, and that was a conflict resolution mechanism. And much of the problems that we see in public, that we gives us the impression that that might be on a shaky agreement or on shaky ground, is because they didn't really make work about this conflict resolution institution or agreement, because that could have solved the issues about the national health insurance, about Bella Act, and perhaps they could have resolved some of the issues about the municipalities and even in Gauteng, the provincial government. They could have discussed it there first. And the president, I think, has learned a hard lesson that unless you create institutions to facilitate the process, there will always be this public display of backing and throwing about who's right and whose point is the strongest and who will leave and who threatens to leave. You have to get rid of the idea that you can threaten to leave the government of national unity in public, and the only way you can do it is to put up an institution that resolves issues before it becomes an issue of public display. So I think one must, if you take that out of the equation and then you ask the question, what are the issues that one has to look at? I think, firstly, you have to give it to some of these DA ministers. They really grind it. They really try to make a difference, at least in bureaucratic type of positions. By the way, I haven't seen anything about John Steenhuisen. He's probably, I'm going to Nampo tomorrow. I'll have a look if I see him there. But he is the worst performer of all the DA ministers in the sense that he's nowhere. You don't see anything about him. You don't hear anything, except when you appoint the wrong people into his office. It's an absolute atrocity what he's done there. And I don't want to quote Johnson here, but even Johnson said, how much worse can you get when you enter office like he has done? But so I think there's the Bella agreement. I think the president, by the way, he had bad advice. You cannot sign a law and then say, these two I will put on hold. If he wants to change that, he will have to send it back to Parliament to make changes to that. But I know for a fact, and I think we all agree there, that as far as the national health insurance, he's going to renegotiate it, not necessarily because of the government of national unity, but several things played a role there. The one is that I think there's a lot of very important people who said to him that this is a really almost unattainable thing if you do it the way the government foresees it. And I also think that there's important people within the ANC. But then there was this survey, and I'm not 100% sure that the survey played the role that some people would like to argue that, which soon after he signed the act, suddenly there was a dip. The Social Research Foundation showed it in the pre-election support for the ANC, and a lot of people attributed that to the black middle class that suddenly feared or withdrew their support for the ANC. I think it's a bit of a skip to get to that point, but the fact remains is they're going to renegotiate the national health insurance plan. And I think I heard a whistle, but I could be wrong because things can change, that he will be willing to make some compromises with the Bella Act in an effort to appease opposition parties, because in some areas they did lose. If so far they didn't get a lot out of the government of national unity.
He alluded to it last night in his address to ANC at the ANC celebrations. He said that they are going to look at the structures to strengthen those structures that have been raised by the partners within the coalition, and referencing the Bella Act and obviously NHI. You wanted to comment, Susan, in terms of what are we comparing here? How do we then judge the success, in inverted commas, of what we've seen the past 100 days plus?
I agree in the first place with Pete that yes, some people have been sparking also from the opposition parties, especially the DA, in that I would love to hear something more that Good has been doing or the PAC has been doing in that coalition, whether they are making any profound contribution. And that is where I think we really need to improve this coalition agreement called the Statement of Intent, and agree with Pete A that yes, much more attention should be given to the conflict resolution mechanism. Too much is simply in Cyril Ramaphosa's hands to say, yes, we can talk about this. No, we cannot go in that direction. overall, I think there is such a need to make this moment in South African history, this coalition, GNU coalition moment, one of different ways, getting different ways of doing things in government. And here I'm pleading for accountability, transparency. Why on earth should we not get to know much more about which political party in this coalition has been making what kind of contribution, what kind of proposals for the betterment of society overall in cabinet? And then also communication of those decisions, those deliberations by top level leaders, not by a spokesperson in a presidency who calls opposition party members of GNU to account and say, you can't make your own policy. A junior minister cannot go in and do that. I would like to see top leaders of the parties, the main parties, if not all the parties, in this coalition GNU, going out, let's say about once a month or once every 2 months, and making a joint statement publicly. This is what we have been saying. This is what we have been deliberating on. This is how we want to make the fate of South Africans become much better under this government. Otherwise, and the electorate is going to get very tired very soon of just taking the words of the politicians. And each time there's a crisis, but then it turns out not to be a real crisis. I think there's a great need among citizenry, voters of South Africa, to get the details, primary information on what is happening inside government. There is no legal or constitutional obligation to keep the deliberations of cabinet silent.
Yeah, I agree with Susan. I think what the president should be doing right now, I think that's one thing. The other thing is he should immediately get performance review process in place. But the ministers are actually doing their job. The second thing that he could do is just to show that he's clearing the desk, is he can get lifestyle audits on all members of cabinet. Once you do that, it creates the impression of transparency, and that we mean business and we're going to have a clean government. And I think that's of critical importance, that you'll remember just after this government of national unity was announced, there was a bit of inflowing capital, there was a positive feeling towards South Africa. If you want to maintain it, you have to put the architecture and infrastructure in place, do lifestyle audits, get a proper report back from ministers, and get them to sign a performance agreement and hold them to it. Every 8 months or 6 months, you hold them to those agreements, and it's for public. The last time when the president had such an arrangement, he suddenly said, well, it's not for public. We're not going to discuss this in public. You have to do that. If you want to change the idea, the perception of how this government is functioning, those things you have to do if you're the president.
Interestingly, there was one time under Zuma's regime. Sorry, Lynette. Just one quick point. Under Zuma's time, at one point, I think it was accidentally, but those performance agreements were online, available publicly if one knew the 200 different component linked URL to use. But that was fascinating. But when I realized it was available, it disappeared, and it has not reappeared under Ramaphosa. But there is a serious need for that.